Welcome to Take One Whiteboard, where we are capturing in-the-moment conversations with thought leaders on practical solutions towards getting better results. Take one means it is literally one take, unrehearsed and spontaneous. Participants trust the energy of the moment and feel free to explore and share their thinking, often in rapid exchanges with layering of ideas. This can feel unconventional, but the resulting discoveries are candid and honest. We do our best to leave it unedited. I am Stuart Morse, and thanks for tuning in. So, welcome here today. Once again, coming back to visit us. Today we are here with Lissa Pohl. So, Lissa, tell me about who Lissa Pohl is.
Well, I do leadership consulting, but I do it with a little bit of a different twist. I have my own consulting business called In Good Spirits, as well as I work for the University of Kentucky. Doing leadership development and working with students and organizations, and also leadership development outreach in the community. So I wear a lot of different hats, but yeah.
Very good. So that's how Liz and I met each other, was through her work and her research, and with our work with leaders and what's going on around organizations. So we're going to have a conversation here with Liz about what is top of mind for you.
I'm excited.
Very good.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing that is top of mind for you right now in what you're doing around those subjects?
Well, I think the top of my mind is that we oftentimes make leadership very complex. And there's, if you go out and you look at the ways people study leadership, right? You go out and there's books, and every leadership pundit has a lot of different takes. Leaders need to do this, they need to do that, they need to do this. The top
so this
five
giant to-do list,
right. And there's the top 5 most fundamental, right? So for me, I'm like, God, this gets so complex for leaders. So what can you do to make it simpler? So for me, I really like to bring it down to 4 fundamentals. All right. So the 4 fundamentals for me would be, okay, let's say there's characteristics of leadership. Characteristics.
That's right. We don't count on for spelling.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Okay, so when I do this exercise, I actually do a brainstorm, because people come in with their own expectations of what leadership is and what it isn't, and so I just kind of get them thinking about it. But when I brainstorm this, they list all sorts of stuff. So, let's say good leaders are good communicators, right?
Okay.
Communication. Or they have a vision.
So this is what people are bringing to what they believe leadership to be.
Right. So okay. I'll do a whole list, and I'll get like 20-something ideas up here. It might be they're compassionate, right?
Right. So is what you're seeing here, the reason you're getting 20 things, relate back to this constant bombardment of to-do lists,
absolutely.
books?
Yeah. Because
good.
I think what happens is that, okay, I need to, as a leader, I need to do this, this, and this, and this, right? But if you could focus on 4 things. So when I get through this and I say, well, I've read all the books, but none of them boil it down to 4 things. That if we focused on that, all these other things will come about.
Okay.
So when I get there, we usually boil down, I usually have to give this away, is awareness. Okay, for me, is kind of the umbrella.
Oh, there we go.
All right, so there's this umbrella, and there's there's this umbrella-looking kind of thing. All right, so awareness, but awareness of self and other. And this is, as if anyone's done any EQ stuff, this is under the realm of EQ, emotional intelligence. All right, so someone says, what else do we and they might say knowledge, experience, yada, yada, yada. So if they say knowledge, this is more of the IQ portion, right? All right, you have to know. I'm not going to follow you if you're leading an IT company and you have no IT experience. I'm probably not going to follow you, right? Or I'm not going to even know how to motivate you if I don't have some knowledge of the field. So when I look at this, so there's IQ and there's this EQ portion too, but what gives you awareness, right? So I'm like, well, does awareness just happen? La la, no, it doesn't happen just on its own.
So how is awareness learned?
Well, awareness.
Or do you think it's genetic?
No, no, no. I think awareness, we're all aware. It's that we don't necessarily understand how to be aware. Okay.
So very good. So we are all, we have a level of awareness, but the how piece, that's interesting. Okay.
Right, right.
So
and
that's the real piece.
how do we become more aware? But when you're just looking at EQ, this awareness of self and others and how to manage my own emotions and other people's emotions, that's all part of the EQ equation. But it comes through a different source. So to get awareness, we have to have feedback, right, from our environment.
Yeah, that's how we learn.
Right. And I have to get, as a leader, I need to have feedback. I need to be able to receive it and to be able to give it effectively. All right?
So it's this,
okay,
it's
right.
this exchange
So when I get
of
feedback,
information,
guess
right.
what? I get feedback, I get more awareness, right?
Okay.
All right? But if that's where we stay as an organization, where we just get a lot of feedback, what's happening, you know, blah, 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 nothing moves. So leaders,
that's the example of, well, hey, we'll survey everybody, and then you don't do anything
exactly.
with the findings.
Right, right.
Oh, no,
so
we've got it.
So the doing part is taking action, right?
There you go. It's yeah. Because if
Right.
I take the survey, if I'm down in the company and I take a survey and I say, great, I took my time to answer this
Right.
survey.
So what
So
happens is when
what'd you do with it?
when I take action, guess what? I get more feedback. And when I get more feedback, I get more awareness, whether it's about myself and how I'm leading or about how I need to lead others more, right? And then I can take a different action.
So you're creating this loop.
Correct.
Right?
It's
Awareness.
basically
So you
just
have
a
this
feedback.
awareness.
It's a basic feedback
Right.
loop.
Feedback. Okay.
But when I
Take
ask people, how is this all done? People don't have a clue how this is all done. So what we need to do is I'll ask them, so how did you get here today? What brought you to this workshop today on leadership?
And how do people answer that?
They say, well, a car. They say,
Oh.
a car brought me. I said, well, what?
Do they say, well, someone told me to be here?
Yeah, right, or motivation,
I
or
was
yeah,
told.
right, exactly. They'll say, yeah, what brought me here?
But
well,
so you're
it's
talking
part
about
of
the physical.
Right. So,
How
but
did you get
people
here
don't see
physical?
that.
It's
People don't see
interesting.
it. So I ask them, I say, so what actually brought you here? And for me, this is the fourth fundamental. And what I call it, you have a body. And so I say, your body brought you here. You wouldn't have emotions. You wouldn't have an intellect if you didn't have a body.
Have a form that needed to move through
Right,
space.
right. It's our body that provides us with all the information to have a thought, to have emotions, to be able to connect. It's our body. And so I'm really interested in the embodiment
So
of leadership.
if I can encapsulate, you're
Okay.
basically saying we have all this stuff that we're trying to learn in our head. We're getting feedback
Mm-hmm. Right.
and everything. But then this physical form of body.
Right.
Okay.
And I call it somatic.
So S-O-M.
Intelligence.
Where does that word come from? Because that's not a word I'm
No, it's not. In gents, there we
heard
go.
a lot. I mean, you don't. If you go out and look at these things around leadership, say, you're walking down the street, hey, leadership, yeah, somatic intelligence. What's that all about?
Okay, somatic means of or pertaining to the body. It's Latin, and it comes out of biology. It's around cells, so, we have a somatic cell. But in this context, and it's growing, actually, this is really quite the kind of the leading edge in leadership development, is this development and awareness that somatic intelligence informs these other four. And if you could just, because you can't get to a vision without knowing yourself, right?
Right.
You don't know how to communicate if you don't know yourself.
So I know you've mentioned before in our conversations this other piece, this PQ, this
Right.
physical intelligence.
So this
so that lives within this somatic. Is somatic bring the whole thing together?
Yes.
Is this? I mean, this leading, because I've heard these terms of kind of being compartmentalized,
Right.
but this kind of is the thinking. If I'm hearing you correctly, this is, if you want to talk about it as a holistic
Correct.
piece, you're now talking about somatic intelligence, where
Right.
all the parts work together in harmony.
Absolutely. And if we forget this piece, then it's really hard to understand how to be more effective.
And then it gets
in-
complicated because, I need to be IQ right
Right.
now. I need BQ right now. Versus, no, it's about
being able to take the information in the moment and be able to leverage it to be in service to others.
Information in the moment. So it's really about what's happening in the moment.
Right.
So that's a lot of, and that's I think why we connected a lot, because that's what we're talking about too in our model, is this idea of how do you manage the moment? Because the inefficiencies in leadership happen in the moment.
Right.
Not, oh, don't you remember where I'm trying to go? No, but what you just
Right.
said to me and what you just projected to me, I am in resistance. I mean, we see this in our international work where people from different cultures, already something different has been stood up.
Right.
And if I don't understand or taking that information, so this accelerates. If you do this at a high level, I would imagine you would get a lot of acceleration of this to do it
Absolutely.
in the moment.
Okay, so it takes the concepts. Let's say we have another concept of intention, right? Leaders have to have intention that then drive the vision, right? Or
Right.
their goal, right? But what does an intention feel like? It can be, most of the time like, well, I have an intention, and if it's stuck in your head, you don't necessarily know how to move it. But intention is actually a physical way of being. Intention. Yeah, and so what's interesting, and we've had these conversations before, is how do I get this feeling of embodied leadership? What are different ways to do that? And one of the ways that I have found really effective is actually working and collaborating with horses to do it.
So okay, so I like what we've been talking about this from our world. This
Right.
idea, what's this balance or equilibrium between
Right.
energy of self, energy
Right.
of world. But you're wrapping this and I really like where you're going with this idea of intention, because leadership is nothing unless I have intent. What do I intend to do with this?
Right.
With this information, but also
And how do I communicate that intention?
But even setting up your thinking before you ever even walk into the moment. So how does intention affect my preconceived notions or biases of the meeting or the moment? So I guess, let me reframe that a little bit. If I'm walking into our discussion with you and I already have a intent that's wrapped with biases and
Right.
assumptions, I need to have a different intent for the moment.
Well,
How
I think
does that
I think
balance?
leaders have to walk in and they hold open, or they're open to outcome, but the intention is that they will get to an outcome that works. It might not be my outcome. It might be through a dialogue of different ideas and brainstorming, such that we come to a much better result or end point of a
Okay.
product or a process than just, this is going to happen, I'm going to hold that intention until we get it my way, right? Well, that's not necessarily leadership. It's also stifles creativity. Intention is really being aware and in the present moment to be able to have something happen, and I'm holding that intention for the best thing to happen, and I have to see it happen. But also, once I'm clear about what needs to happen, what my vision is or our organizational vision
I get
then
clarity.
we can
This wrapped
right.
with clarity.
Correct.
And actually, I would think by doing this in the moment, you're bringing clarity to the moment.
Right, and it's easier to follow.
Everything, so
Right.
we go from complexity to things become easier. So, all right,
Right.
so your work, you mentioned horses.
Right.
So, the horse has been around a long time. We've had a long relationship with horses.
Right, absolutely.
So are they back? Why are
Well,
they
I
in
think-
your work?
Well, it's interesting because I think they're back to teach humans something, okay? Because we have, and there's one way of looking at horses as just, livestock or they're tools to be used. But in my work, I really see them as co-facilitators because they bring their own intelligence, which is highly somatic, right? They are somatic beings.
So tell us a little bit about their intelligence.
Okay.
Tell us about what is special about a horse and its intelligence.
Well, I think it's their whole different paradigm in the way they function in the world, because horses are animals of prey, all right? So, and we're top predators.
Meaning that they have to watch out for predators.
Correct. It's they're social herd animals.
If they're
and
not
we
careful,
are too.
they become a victim.
Right. So as an animal of prey, they are constantly looking out for their herd's best interest. Okay?
And then the second piece is they operate in relationship with each other.
Right, and
to
each one
help
of them
that.
is at an individual
And they have
leadership
hierarchy.
level.
Geez,
right.
that sounds like a company.
It does, exactly.
A herd
we could,
is a
we could learn
company.
a lot from herd dynamics, and we do. I mean, I'll do workshops on herd dynamics.
So are they doing this? Are they operating in this kind of
Yes.
same manner?
Yeah.
So are they
24/7.
So they are biologically wired
Correct. They are somatic beings.
They're somatic beings.
Right, and that's why we can learn so much about them, because to be effective in collaborating with them, for them to want to follow us and for them to want to do anything with us, we have to be more like them.
So I really think this is interesting, because if they are an organization, if you're a leader, you are stepping into their organization, and they have to say, do I even want you to lead me?
Right.
What is your intent and clarity about what you bring to the moment?
Right. And they're looking for safety. Can you provide me with safety? And I'm not going to make you my leader or see you as leader until you show up
Which
as
is what
leader.
people want from a leader.
Exactly.
Right. So how are they different from other animals? Like, let's say a dog.
Okay.
I mean, a dog operates in packs.
Similarly, but dogs are predators.
Okay, there's the difference.
Okay, there's the difference. All right, so animals of prey have their eyes on the side of their prey.
So that's why dogs will get aggressive.
Right,
when
and
a horse
exactly, a horse would rather run away. They will fight, so they're not necessarily
but flight is first.
Total prey animals. They're actually non-predatory animals, which is so they don't tend to predate. They will defend, and they're not like scared little bunny rabbits, which run off. So I think what's different from a dog is that a dog, and you can tell, is because a dog wants to be part of the pack, and they offer their head. Okay, so they offer their head. But a horse, if you go for the head of a horse, like you go to pet a horse and they go, oh, that's because you're being predatory. That's a predatory tendency. And so our innate, if you go down, I don't know if you know anything about action logics, like Keegan and Leahy's action logics, well, the predator-prey dynamic is, I think, ultimately the most basic action logic, meaning an action logic is, where do we come from? What is the screen or the soup or the lake that we're swimming in? And we can't see out of it. It's the lens that we see through and then act from. All right, so that's an action logic. And people are at different stages in their development. But to have a predatory action logic means that we're constantly going out and putting that type of thinking out into the world.
So is this?
So it doesn't.
Does this have an action logic to it? Does this fit into this idea of an intention and clarity? Is that a type of action logic?
Yeah, it's a much higher action logic, because it's creating a balance. What you were talking about in your model, it's that balance about who I am, my energetic self.
It's about
versus
it's
and
about
what I'm
equilibrium.
projecting out into the world.
Okay, so it's this.
Yes.
This is an action logic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the
and
horse.
And it's a much higher action logic.
So the horse is an animal that we've had a relationship with. And the other thing I think is interesting that you were saying, we also have a cultural relationship with the dog.
Right.
And the horse is different. And the horse, and I was also thinking, not that we have to get into this, but it's the scale.
Oh, yeah.
So there's you stand over a dog.
Right.
You don't stand over a horse.
Right.
And we have,
you can
we'll talk about that a little bit. What happens? So you're using, and I'll get to that, but you're using the horse to teach this.
Yes.
Okay.
So I collaborate with horses, and
So teach may be the wrong word.
Yeah, well, I collaborate with them, and I don't use them because I feel like their intelligence is that's
excellent point.
All right. Okay.
This is there's
Yeah.
I went down a rabbit hole, a pitfall.
Right.
A limitation right there.
Because
it's not about me being in control and say, hey, I'm going to use you for me.
I know. What happens when that happens in an organization, right? People feel it. Even if it's not like spoken, but if I'm just a cog in your wheel and I'm here to teach you or benefit you in some way, it's like, where am I in this? Where's my brilliance?
Okay,
what do I
good.
have to offer for it? So I always talk about working with horses or collaborating with them.
How does the horse help you with this? I mean, what you're talking about.
Okay. Horses help us in this because of their size. You mentioned that, right? So when you're around them, they can be a little intimidating.
They get your attention.
Right. But they don't talk, so we have to use a different form of language, which is somatic or body language. They talk to each other, they move each other around with just very slight movements of the ear, or if you really don't get it, they're going to turn and kick you.
And I can talk to a dog and get them, I can whine or make vocal things with a dog, but a horse...
Horse, it's all pretty much body language.
Language,
right.
Okay,
right.
So it's this physical...
Right.
Intelligence, and then that's a key component that they're bringing to this. Okay,
exactly.
Very good.
Yeah, and their size and just the way they react in the moment, and they are true. They do not lie. Okay, they don't come up with some story. They don't care if you're the Queen of England or
they don't wag their tail like a dog. No,
they do show happiness and they show connection and they show relaxation when they can trust you. Okay, so when trust. So you can't work with a horse. I mean, you could power over a horse, but the horse usually wins, right? right.
That's called being thrown.
Right. Exactly. So you have to get incredibly curious. You have to get outside of your comfort zone, and you have to use the right side of your brain to work with horses instead of your left side. They don't get left brain thinking because they are just totally present, and they react in a moment. And then what's cool about it is they give you feedback in the instant. Okay, so if you do something that they're like, oh, that threw me off, or you get a little predatory, even throwing your shoulder in their face or whatever it is, they're going to go, oh God, another human, please God, give me someone who knows how to talk to me, right? So in the moment, they'll do something, they'll react to how you're showing up right now. And as a coach, when people are out there, I'll say, okay, what did the horse just do? Why did the horse do that? And where might that kind of action, your own kind of how you approach things and people or others or projects, where's that showing up?
So you're able to, if I understand this correctly, you're able to use the horse for someone to learn this in an environment that's very quick, instant feedback, change.
Because as soon as they get aware of that, they try something else. They take a different action, and they get different feedback from the horse, and then they get another awareness, and then they can start working.
And it's a lot about their body, because the horse is reading the body, and they're reading. That's how they pick up on these things.
Right. And they want you. So it's really showing up.
So what happens, what's the practicality of this for leaders when they come and have this experience?
It's because it takes all these sort of more intellectual concepts around leadership and puts it into an actual being of leadership.
So you're playing with this concept is you're going to take this stuff that you've now learned, take all this learned, and I'm going to dump it into an arena.
Out of that left side of their brain and put it into the right side.
So what type of do you work in a round environment, square? I mean, how do you?
We work in a lot of different ways. I will take people. It's all on the ground. It's not horseback riding. Some people are very disappointed when they find, oh, we're not riding. I'm like, no, you can do this in the saddle as well. But mostly, I have groups or individuals come out, and they work on the ground with horses. From literally just leading a horse with a rope.
So you're putting them in an environment,
right, in an arena
with a horse,
and they're either connected or they're not connected.
And
so
then
they might be connected.
I want you to explore this.
Right.
With these,
or I might set up an exercise. Okay, so as a team, you have to get a new client in the door and into their new project or whatever it might be. And so I set up a box in the arena, and as a team, I have to, without talking and without touching the horse, I have to get that horse in that box. How do I do that?
Trust.
Through building trust and influencing them.
Through these cycles
through
of
body
feedback,
language. Right. How do I talk? How do I get? And
how do I manage this?
Right. What do you mean?
To turn it into an intention I have and make it clear.
Right. Because as soon as one person might be able to do it really well because they get really clear and focused, but as soon as you get a team going and everybody has different intentions about where they're going, or they're not clear about what the intention is, or when they go into the tasking mode, all their vision goes out, and then no one knows what's going on.
So it sounds like your main thread on the practical sense of this for leaders and leaders who are leading organizations or team, is you're saying, I'm going to take all these things that have become complex, I'm going to simplify it for you, and you're going to, in this environment, So now you can have intention, clarity around your intentions, and put an action logic to it.
Right.
And they then get, you're raising their semantic intelligence around this to say, I get this.
Right, because we don't leverage, we're doing it. You and I are having a somatic conversation as well as an intellectual conversation right now, right? So you and I are having this right now, but we aren't aware that it's happening. So we have leveraged IQ for years and years. In school, this is what we get, right? Tons of IQ. You got to know, this, and that, right? And then EQ comes on. Well, I know a lot, but how do I convey that?
We've maybe gone overboard a little bit on the IQ. You know,
teach
to the test, teach to the test.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
EQ and awareness
is coming on board, and and I think so. How do we balance all of them? Because the thing is our bodies are what is allowing us to do this, but we don't leverage it. We're not even conscious that we have a body. We get so disassociated from our own body and what it does and what kind of information it gives us.
So I'd like to take what you've just described, you know, and you know our model, this idea of the balance between the analytic and creative, and we've taken what you know, talking about this IQ and EQ, but there's also this balance between, at a larger scale, this balance between strategy and culture.
Right.
So how does this, as this mechanism works and you have these pieces that are more analytic in an organization, things that are more creative, how does what you're doing impact this?
Well, because when we were talking about this morning, you were talking about this is a holistic model, and it's not quite a holistic model because it doesn't incorporate the PQ part of it.
The physical.
The physical.
Right.
So, yeah. So
this
I think
is to talk about this, but how do you embody this?
Right. So all of this is driven by being aware and getting feedback about your strategy from the people who are creating it. Is it the best strategy?
So put this, you're actually talking about this outer circle, this as a feedback loop. If you're going to have a strategy, you've got to put it into the culture. So there's another diagram that we have that we call the cultural prism. That culture is like a light prism. And whatever you project into it, it's going to refract.
Right.
And you know, I'm going to have a strategy and I'm going to put it against this culture and it's going to refract. I think what you're talking about is I'm going to give you a feedback loop around that, to where I'm going to give you intelligence to understand what's going on when all this happens.
Or what's the best idea according to what your system can take. So for me, the horses have always been a part of the puzzle to be able to start doing this human to human. So, but that's a whole nother talk that we'll have sometime.
All right, very good. Follow up video.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
So let's now bring this down to I'm a leader. I'm in an organization. I see this video. I get what you're talking about. What are steps I can begin to take in my own thinking to I know they can contact you and have this experience with you or bring it in their team, but just as step one, how do I start thinking about this in a practical sense for myself?
Well, I think that there's some great books out there. One is called Power of the Herd by Linda Kohanov, and she does this work as well, but she's a really great writer. And I think what I really admire about her is that she brings in some historical leaders, like George Washington was ultimately one of the best horsemen in the world, in the United States and Europe. And the way that he actually won the war, he was like outnumbered by the French, but a ton. But he used non-predatory tactics to win. It wasn't predatory, where you head on,
Did he talk about that he pulled that from his knowledge of the horse? Or
no, but people often felt confidence from him, and he would ride his horse into battle. And if you know horses, they hate the smell of blood. I mean, they freak out. But when you have someone who can ride a horse and the horse totally trusts,
look at Napoleon. All these
exactly.
The way horses.
Buddha was also a horseman.
Horses have been used throughout history to lead troops in the battle. Get on the horse.
But to be able to do that, you have to commit. You have to
be.
And
the horse trusting the rider who's about to lead.
You have to be this. You have to be at this level of leadership and awareness to be able to control your horse, keep your intention, and project it out to your troops, right?
And now
As a
take that
general.
into chaos.
Correct. And hold it.
And hold it.
And what does it
Fascinating.
feel like holding an intention? That's what's really important. Is you don't know what it feels like and how much energy it takes to hold an intention. As a leader, oh, I've got a great vision, let's go do it.
Well,
but if you aren't
really
behind them and
interesting.
holding
How
that,
do you hold that?
how do you hold it for as long as it takes? How do you project that information through your body
And stability.
across the world?
And now you're talking about stability of leadership.
Correct.
Very good.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, Lissa, thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time. Now, what did you, what was your experience about just this conversation on a whiteboard? And how
This
did-
has been really fun. I think it's great because it's just really, we were playing off of each other and came up with some new thinking, which is a dialogue.
Right,
which
because
is
we've had a
awesome.
conversation,
Right.
but we've all of a sudden, I
Right.
mean, I've learned a lot here
Yeah.
with you today.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much
You're
for your
welcome.
time, and hope you enjoyed the video.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We hope you found value in what we have captured, and we look forward to seeing where you will take the conversation.